Good morning, everyone. So, I was thinking yesterday, because I've been having this sort of conversation on the Mayflower Descendants Facebook group, right? And somebody posted something about, I'm a direct descendant of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene, and, all these things going back to the Kings of Troy. And I'm just going, oh, crap, not again. The thing is, just off the bat, like back in 1999, I actually did get a copy of Lawrence Gardner's Bloodline of the Holy Grail. I have since tossed that book, okay? So it's a book that went out of its way to try to trace the lineage of Jesus all the way back to I think like Sumerian gods, and also I'm trying to remember what was in the beginning of the book. It was something back to Mesopotamia, but it also had a lot of very, very incorrect genealogies. Now, there's entire portions of these royal lineages that are correct. At least correct insofar as, these portions of the pedigrees accurately citing what might be medieval forgeries. Okay? It's like trying to trace all the way back to Dardanus, trying to trace back to, Priam of Troy, trying to trace all the way back to Brutus of Rome or Brutus of Troy and of Britain, all these different very ancient pedigrees, allegedly, that, it's fine that even historically you have books like the Aeneid that basically connect the lineage of Julius Caesar all the way back to to Aeneas, and him being the son of Aphrodite, I believe, through one of the princes of Troy. Anyways, whether Julius Caesar can really trace back to Aeneas, whether that's actually correct or not, I can't say, and there's really no solid proof to back that up. But sometimes traditional pedigrees are correct. You look at Irish, royal pedigrees, and some of them, at least as far back as to the medieval period, are correct. Scottish chiefly lineages, things like that, are in most cases pretty correct, at least back to a certain point. And it doesn't mean that you have a birth certificate or death certificate for every single individual. Our criteria now for what makes a lineage correct is much more advanced. But at the same time, because they had less of that criteria, it's easy for somebody to say, oh, well, I'm the son of this guy, when you're not. And then it turns out that whole lineage going further back, well, from your alleged father all the way back to say King so-and-so 20 generations prior, that might be correct. But it also might not be. Okay? If your father's not your father, then your father's ancestors are not your ancestors, right? So all it takes is one break in the line. Long story short, late 1999, I finally had access to the internet. I was a senior in high school, graduated class 2000, and I'm at Outhouse High School. I'm doing all this genealogy work because I'm curious about stuff. I wanted to know more myself, but also I was trying to verify if some of the stuff that this guy had in his book was correct, because some of it I was pretty sure was not. And basically, I realized that looking at actual sourced royal Welsh pedigrees, that essentially there were pinholes in this guy's story. The more early obvious signs were that he made King Arthur, yes, the son of Igraine, but not the son of Uther Pendragon. Uther Pendragon became a title, and Aidan Mac Gabron, who was the father of an historical Scottish King Arthur, that was a century later than the alleged King Arthur of legend, right? So they kind of he combined the two Arthurs, and he used the Scottish, Balriadan royal lineage, but then he also used Igraine, who is Brittonic. So even though in the legends, Arthur's father was also Brittonic. And yes, there were several Arthurs in Britain. There was actually several within a century of the alleged Arthur. So then there's Riothemus, which might be the archetype for the historical or the legendary Arthur. There's a lot of stuff that we don't really know. There's a lot of theories, a lot of discussion. And so, anyways, just going by the legends alone that I know he's basing part of the stuff off of, I came to the conclusion that something wasn't totally on the up and up. And then when I saw other royal Welsh pedigrees, like random pedigrees that were missing generations or things like that, I'm going, no, this guy is not doing his work correctly. I'm a 17-year-old at the time using the internet and also using other books that have pedigrees in them that are where it's actually cited. This guy's not doing things correctly. And then, of course, as I got even older and long after I tossed that garbage book, I realized a lot of other things. So in his foreword, I think it was the foreword, it was by His Royal Highness Prince Michael of Albany, the last direct legitimate descendant of Bonnie Prince Charlie and the heir to the Stuart throne. At the time, I didn't know any different. But, you know, it was also around 99 that, like, the Niad Nask, the Ancient Order of Irish Knights, kind of, like, came into the news, and shortly afterwards, like, they got discredited because they're bogus. They weren't really some ancient order of Irish chivalry, some secret order of Irish chivalry, no less. It's kind of like you have all these fake Templar-based chivalric societies that claim to go back to the Knights Templar. The only one that's legit that I'm aware of is one that's in Portugal, because that's the only place that the Templars were not actually, like, disbanded. But even then, it's like, so what? Okay, you're from the Knights Templar. What does that really mean? Then you have the Scottish ones where it's like, okay, well, you know, Rosslyn Chapel was supposedly a Freemasonic. I'm sorry, it was supposedly a Knights Templar that built it, and then it's a Masonic temple or chapel. Okay, the history is a bit sketchy at best. Trying to verify, like, it's more of a narrative. When the narrative becomes history in the eyes of people, then it just goes on and on forever. There's really no solid evidence that connects the Scottish Freemasons to the Knights Templar. There's none. There's a lot of lore from much later in time, but that's much later in time. And all it takes is somebody saying, I'm going to create a legend right now. I'm going to say that we are the real Knights of the Round Table, and then we're going to use enough money from our patrons to basically make it true. I mean, that's all it takes. Okay? It's called myth making. So, got to be careful about that. So, when people say, I want to trace back to a royal ancestor, right? Well, then people start paying people in the 1900s, or the 1800s, the 19th century, sorry, to make them nobles, basically. And so you ended up with these lineages that were incorrect, where, like, a portion of the lineage is brought to the public eye that might actually be correct, and then other portions, but the part connecting you to it is, let's just say, less than accurate. Okay? You got people that want to be part of the Mayflower Society. Okay? And that's cool. I have an ancestor from, you know, a Mayflower lineage. I descend from George Sewell. That's my Mayflower lineage. So you've got but here's the thing. I mean, you're going to find people that have incorrect lineages that really don't trace them back to the Mayflower. You're going to have people that claim lineage back to Pocahontas, right? Well, through the wonders of internet genealogy, which is not always correct, I found that I was allegedly a descendant of Pocahontas. Until I spent the next probably 8 to 10 hours looking into it, and I was like, wait a second. The descendants of Pocahontas, at least from, like, her son downward for a time, is a matter of public record. Like, you can actually, like, these are individuals that were well known and are kind of locally famous. They were prominent families were descended from Pocahontas. And what that means in the end is that you have people that have portraits painted of them, literally just a couple generations after Pocahontas. Like, these were not paupers. These are not farmers. These aren't random people. These are people that actually at that time were prominent citizens. So if you're tracing back to one of those families, well, you better be descended from one of the actual kids of that family. And it turned out that the lineage I found online a few hours prior was incorrect. That the child was not actually the child of these two parents who historically are known to have had X number of kids with these particular names, but not the name of my ancestor, right? So you've got to be really careful when it comes to stuff like that. You got to be very careful when it comes to doing your family history. You got to make sure that you're using real sources. That when you don't have all the sources, you're using actual history. It can be difficult at times, but that's how you have to do it if you want to verify where you're from. Okay. All it takes is one break in the lineage for the rest of the pedigree to be fake, as far as it pertains to you. Like, it may be real for somebody else because that lineage does go back from this person further back, but from their child down, that may not actually be your lineage because that child isn't really the child of that person. Okay. But people, I want to find famous people in my family. I want so badly to be royalty. I want so badly to have famous people because it makes me feel special. And don't get me wrong, I've got famous ancestors, and it does feel cool. All right, it does make you feel a little bit special in some ways. But here's the thing. So I'm a descendant of Chief Benjamin Perryman, the Muskogee people, right? And not only was he a chief, but also he had sons that were chiefs, and he had like grandsons that were chiefs. He had and then like great grandsons as well that were like not in the male lineage, but I believe Pleasant Porter was a descendant of Benjamin Perryman through a female lineage. And, you've got people like Albert Pike McKillop, my great-great-grandfather's brother, who was a very prominent man in the Muskogee government. So, and he being descended from Benjamin Perryman. So you have these different guys out there, these men and women who are descendants, legitimately, well-known descendants, or well-verifiable descendants from Benjamin onward. But here's the thing. You got family members saying, oh, but Benjamin Perryman's wife, like, which wife? Like, I don't know I don't even know if all of his kids have the same mom. They could have, but they might not have. You look at some of the clan names of these individuals, and it's like, that implies that there's more than 3 clans, or more than 2 clans, sorry. And if that's correct, then it's very possible that, and I mean, the naming conventions, it varies a little bit, but usually, you usually tend to get some kind of a name based upon your own clan or your father's clan, because you get your mother's clan. So that's how it is with most native tribes, okay? Especially the 5 civilized tribes. It's like absolutely the case with all the 5 civilized tribes. You belong to your mother's clan, and among, you kind of become like a son or daughter of your father's clan, specifically with the Creek and Seminole people. But it also kind of the same with the rest of them there as well. So, anyways, you got to be careful when doing genealogy, because I have a cousin I recently connected with, she's like a 4th cousin or something. We have the same great-great-grandfather that I mentioned, but different great-great-grandmothers. Now, her internet genealogy showed her as descending from Sally. The problem is, Sally only had 1 kid, my great-grandmother. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, your great-grandfather was actually like my great-grandmother's older half-brother. Different mom, same dad. And it's like, oh, I was wondering about that. And, so like, I had to kind of, correct the record on that so she knew. But then I got to double check the message. I don't want to misquote her, but I think she said that her mom or somebody found lineage back that we're descended from Hopothli Miko, who has a portrait painted of him. He was a well-known chief back in the early 1800s or whatnot. I think it was or late 17 or late 1800s. So the problem is, I'm like, okay, well, how are we descended from this guy? And what she did is she connected these stupid vehicles, man, stupid trucks. that of Marty behind a PG&E guy. So, at least going at decent speed. Anyways, you have Benjamin Perryman, like, I don't know if his father was Theophilus or Theodore Perryman. All we know is it's like a Theo period. Right? That's how it's written out. As far as like connecting any of his siblings or first cousins and whatever else, like his lineage is kind of difficult to decipher. All I know, as I understand, is his mother was Creek, apparently the daughter of a chief, whose name we don't know, and the mother's name we don't know, and then the father was Theo Perryman. That's it. That's all I know. But there's other Perrymans that exist in the Creek Nation. Like, how are they all related to each other exactly at that time? I don't know. That's what's hard to find out, discover. There's not enough written records by Indians. All right, that's when like mixed-blooded ancestors just started kind of writing records down because their dads were white, and so they had English education. Okay, so, anyways, I think that her mother or my cousin's mother conflated Benjamin's father as being the son of this person or that person. Anyways, I had to kind of tell her, yeah, this is just given the timeline alone, Benjamin's not the grandson of this guy. He's not the grandson of Apothlimico. That doesn't add up to the actual records, to his actual timeline. Given when his son-in-law was born alone, when his daughter would have been alive, that I'm descended from, there's no way that Apothlimico is descended from. Oh, I'm sorry, that Benjamin Perryman is descended from Apothlimico, right? There's just no way. So, as cool as it would be to have that famous ancestor tacked onto our pedigree, it's just not true. It's kind of like I have one cousin who thought that Benjamin Perryman's wife was black because one of the freedmen descendants with a Perryman name, I think, it might have been Pohan Perryman, I could be wrong, was like, there's information like 20 years ago floating around on the web, it makes you sound old, that was claiming that his wife was black and therefore all Perryman descendants had black blood. And it's like, well, okay, but where's the proof of that? Like, I mean, we don't even know her name, much less her race. We can only assume based upon, her children's, or the descendants of Benjamin himself, that like his wife or wives, as I'm speculating, were probably Creek. Like by blood. I mean, it's not that they couldn't have had some black lineage or some white lineage. We don't really know. That's the problem. We don't even know her name or their names. Because, again, like, there could have been multiple wives. That was common back then. Especially if you're a prominent man. Like, if you're a prominent leader, having multiple wives simultaneously, not just throughout your life, but simultaneously was not uncommon. I mean, my great-great-great-grandfather had 2 wives at the same time. His father had 2 wives at the same time. This is, that's just the way it was among the Muskogee people. And yeah, I believe my great-great-great-grandfather was the local town chief of Arbica. I know he had like 2 brothers that were part of the House of Kings. So, yeah, that kind of like, I have good reason. I mean, he was a prominent man. Let's just put it that way. He was an important person. So, and yeah, that's close enough my lineage that it's like, yeah, that's pretty cool. That's my great-great-great-grandfather. He was a local famous guy. Anyways, it's also easier to prove. You go further back. You go back to like when written records were choppy. It's just hard. So, but people want to connect it. So, anyways, I have another distant cousin who claims that, my mother told me, and apparently it's a family tradition that Benjamin Perryman's wife was blah 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 blah. I can't remember what she was saying, but I'm thinking, okay, well, I mean, where did she get the information from? Or first she told me what it was, and then I'm like, where did that information come from? And it's like, my mother told me it was some family tradition, blah blah blah. I'm like going like, yeah, I don't really believe. I mean, I don't believe it, because you got people that, my mom told me, and it must be family tradition. Therefore, it is a family tradition. And then it gets told to me that it's a family tradition. That type of stuff happens a lot. And people are not always they don't always check the facts. It's like Benjamin's son-in-law, David McKillop. I got one person saying, oh, well, his parents were born in the States, and here's their tombstones, their headstones, here's their this and that. I'm like, okay, well, how do you know those are his parents? Because according to what I've heard, according to the, like Chronicles of Oklahoma, things like that, he came from Scotland as a child with his parents. And then the story started to change where, oh no, they came over and then they died there and he went over here. It's like, no, you got to show me. I'm like, look, you got to show me actual records. So you got to show me actual proof, because I'm doing our genealogy based off of actual, like, either well-sourced information that others have actually collected or my own well-sourced research. And I try to look at the facts as much as I can directly myself to see if anything's correct. And that's the whole deal. So you have to do your own research, okay? You have to look at this. And I have cousins. I've seen their trees on Ancestry. I'm going like, no, this is wrong. You didn't do that right. I didn't tell them yet. Some of them I haven't told yet. But I'm just going like, that is definitely not correct. That is 100% not correct. Okay, you've connected these lineages in weird ways because Ancestry suggested that this person is this. It's like, oh yes, like my great grandma must have she had been in Scotland at one point. Dude, she never left Oklahoma. Okay, like she didn't have property in Scotland. Just because her name was Effie McKillop doesn't mean that she was in Scotland at that time. So just because Ancestry suggests it on a leaf, one of the little leaves, you click on the leaf, that does not mean that leaf is correct. Okay, like I'm trying to trace my mom's paternal grandmother's lineage. My stepmom, who's been so kind as to do some work as well, unfortunately misconnected some records. At least as far as we can tell, they're misconnected. As far as I can verify, it looks like that's incorrect information. But finding the more correct information is hard. Okay, Joplin, Missouri. Maybe there's just problems. I don't know. I gotta get my grandfather's actual birth certificate. I gotta fork out some cash. Ancestry is not cutting it. Okay, and Ancestry costs too much money these days anyway. I don't like paying for membership if it's not gonna give me what I want. So, and what I want is correct information. What I want is more information and more correct information. That's how you got to do it. So, again, getting back to my maternal side. It's like I have another cousin that because she believed what was written on the internet about Perryman's wife, as in the singular, being black. I'm like, okay, well, even back then I'm like, okay, well, like, where's the proof of that? Like, she's like, well, there's nothing wrong with us being part black. I'm like, it's not about whether it's right or wrong to have black lineage. It's about, do we have black lineage? I mean, for a while I'm like, oh, well, I might have some black blood. Cool. But I'm like, yeah, but it's a maybe for a while in the early stages. Then I'm like, I'm hardballing it going, no, you got to show me the proof because I want to know if it's true or not, right? You got to know if this stuff's actually correct. So, I mean, here's the funny thing. My mom told me my whole life that my dad's mom did a bunch of genealogy and traced us back to the kings of France. She's calling her oldest son, my Uncle Patrick, the Dauphin, right? Well, I don't know if her lineage even traces back there. I know that she had that, on my great grandfather's side, he was French, but his lineage was mostly French, but I haven't found anything on his side connecting any of that. And as far as the Irish side of my grandmother, I have nothing connecting us that I'm aware of. I haven't been able to trace that side of the family back incredibly far. It's actually my grandfather's lineage that traces back to European royalty that I can, more or less verify. But again, it's through very, very junior lineages. So it's not like I'm the heir to the throne of of England, just as I'm a descendant of Edward I. I mean, there's tons of actual legitimate descendants of Edward I. They're just not direct male lineage descendants. They're not senior elder sibling lineages. So, I mean, that's the whole thing about doing genealogies. You got to understand. It's like, Meghan Markle complaining about how, no, the Queen was racist because I'm part black and therefore her grandson is... Dude, they don't care that she's part black. They don't care about that at all. I mean, the Queen loved her grandkids. And I'm not defending the Queen. I'm just saying that, like, I mean, the reason that her kids are not princes and princesses, whereas her husband is a prince, is because her husband is the son of, at the time, the crown prince, the guy who was going to become king. Now he is king. William, his children are princes and princesses. Why? Because he is the heir to the throne. He is the crown prince. His father is now the king of England or the UK. So people going like, it's just racism. No, you got to understand how royal protocol works. These facts don't care about your feelings. They don't care about your ethnic appearance either. They really don't. Okay, there's actually a protocol for how royal titles are given. So when people think, oh, I'm a descendant of this person, that must mean I'm a princess. No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean crap. It means you have an ancestor that might have been a princess a long time ago. That's all it means. So, but yeah, my cousin who's like, oh yeah, we're part black. I'm like, okay, well, again, she also was saying that our ancestor Hope Harjo, which really should be pronounced something more like Hapathri Hajo. I'm still not doing it totally correct, but it's more like that. Hapathri Hajo or Apothli Hajo, something like that. She's like, oh, he might be Apothli Hola. I'm like, no, he's not. No, he's not. What proof do you have connecting us as to that famous man? Well, now, I mean, I would say that, yeah, he was an adherent to Apothli Hola, but, he was not Apothli Hola, okay? Just because the first part of the name is actually technically the same prefix to the name does not mean that, you're the same guy. Heck, you could have the same exact name and not be the same guy. There are several Hope Harjos on record at the same time, sometimes on the same document. So yeah, it's a little bit difficult to, people want to have a bigger tree, a more famous pedigree because it makes them feel special. Well, it doesn't make you special. Who you are, what you do makes you special. But yeah, it is cool to have a special lineage. It is. But you got to make sure it's actually your real lineage. Okay? So yeah. Don't believe everything you see on the internet. Do your due diligence. Look at every primary source record that is available. And sometimes there's not going to be very many of those. Especially when doing Indian genealogy. But when you're doing like Irish genealogy is now hard because you have certain lineages that have, records have just been destroyed. Okay, in modern times. Then you have other records. You got Scottish chiefly lineages, but if your family are poor fishermen living in like a colony on like the Isle of Skye, you might have some records, but it's only going to go so far back. Like Donald Trump can only trace his mother's lineage so far back because they're poor Scottish, crofters and fishermen, living. I think it was on the Isle of Harris. I'm got to double check, but yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing, guys. You're gonna have hard times when it comes to that. But if you're tracing English genealogy, is much easier to trace further back. Records are better; they became very powerful, and so it's much easier to trace that. It gets hard to trace slave lineage back to Africa. It's really hard to do that. But it can be done in some cases, but it's just not super easy. As far as, I don't know much about Asian genealogy. I know that some Hindu genealogies are easy to trace if you have the right records, but, but having that digitized and translated might be hard. Things like that. So due diligence, do the best you can. Birth, baptism, marriage records, that type of stuff are going to be key. Census records. And while census records may not be birth and death records per se, they give you good hints that'll help you to connect to other records. So anyways, I'll chat with you guys later. Don't get overconfident with what you read on the internet, please. All right, I'll catch you guys later. Bye.